All right, I want to go over the starting of the stick animation so you can see how I would do that. I recorded a video yesterday that goes over the rigging part. So the first step in doing this stick rig is you're going to download the stick rig start, okay? And then you'll watch the stick rig rigging. Basically, this is something that is modeled and kind of set up, but not all the way, and you're finishing it off. So you'll make a new project, you'll copy that stick rig start into your project scenes folder, and then you can go ahead and open it up. So I'm going to set my project to the stick rig, then open up the start one just so you can see what it's going to look like. And this is what it'll look like. So this is a perfect scenario where you have something you want to animate and you want to find the easiest, most efficient way to animate this thing. There's a lot of pieces here. These could be even more depending on the kind of model and shapes and whatever else you're dealing with. If I zoom in here, you can see the basics of this. I'm going to turn on wireframe unshaded so I can see the wireframe. So basically there's a platform, that's the main part. There is a gear or a joint, a pivot, hinge, there we go. There's an arm, then there's a hinge, then an arm, then a hinge, then an arm, and then a hinge, then an arm, and so on all the way down to the line, okay? If I was to try to animate this by just grabbing stuff and moving it around, this is not an efficient way to animate because it's just everything is separated, okay? So we need some way to bring it together. So that's where the rigging part is going to come in. I've already created these arrows. For this assignment, you can just leave those arrows there and use those. When we get into the actual U-rigging stuff, you'll see how you can make your own controls, okay? So you can actually go into Illustrator, sketch out the shapes that you would want to use, export it out as a Illustrator 8 file, and then you're able to go to Create Illustrator Objects and bring those in as curves, okay? So that's very helpful, especially if you're modeling something and you have a specific shape. You can create that, bring it into Maya, and use it as a regular curve for anything. Okay, so the goal with this type of thing, the initial part, is that we want to set this up so that as we move this arrow, the platform will move. As we grab this circle and rotate it, then the arms will also move. Okay, that's the goal of doing any kind of rigging. Now, even though this is just a hinge and an arm, this could be any number of things. I could have 55 different items like falling from that arm or connected to that arm. Imagine if it's like a mechanical arm or something, all those pieces could then move with it. If they're all individual, well, now I have to move all those individually, okay? So I'm going to go and open up my rigged one. So this is after you watch the rig video. This is what the rigged end model will look like. I'll have this arrow on top. You'll see that I also have limitations over here. All of my options are not there. Another good thing about rigging is that we can eliminate the ability to screw up. So we don't want to scale this, so we've eliminated scale from that grouping. Okay. Even the best animators, even the best modelers accidentally grab stuff and move it, and you may not recognize that until a week later. Okay. So we've just eliminated it. Also, the rotate X and Y are gone. We don't need to rotate it in this direction here because the hinges don't move in that direction, okay? If they were ball hinges, then they could. They could move in all three directions. We could have the whole thing going. This is our second animation assignment. We're going to keep it simple, okay? Same thing with these guys. They're only one direction. There's no translate, because they're never actually moving up and down. They're never actually moving left and right. Where does all of their motion come from? The platform, right? So everything from this is going to control the movement of all those arms. So when I go to this thing and I look at just that one attribute, there's no guessing. One thing, that's all I can move. And when I move that, I can move all the legs and arms or whatever you want to call them together. And if I'm fancy about how I select things, I can grab all the joints or controls at the same time, and I can do stuff like that. Okay? Now imagine if we didn't have those controls, how difficult something like that would be. Okay? All right, so video 1, how to rig it. It's a simple rig. There's nothing too complex. I've streamlined it as much as possible. After this assignment, we're going to get into character rigs, which are even more complex. There's a lot more stuff going on in there. This is just an introduction to basic controls, and then you'll see some insanity in the next one. Okay, so that's the start of it. So now I'm ready to animate, okay? I go to my storyboards. I can start animating this thing. Now, before you do any final animation, just like the bouncing ball, I recommend you do a practice or 2 practices. Whatever it takes to understand the concepts before you jump into the one that you are going to call your final one, okay? Every time you animate, model anything, it should get faster and better each time. So if it takes you 3 hours to animate this once, the next time it should take you an hour and a half and it should be better. The next time after that, it should take you about a half hour and it should be better, okay? I can probably animate this whole thing within 15 minutes and be done with just a simple animation, okay? So we're gonna do I'm gonna do an animation up here, and you're going to help guide me as to what I should be moving, okay? So where does all the motion come from? We already said that. The platform, okay? So what's the first thing that's gonna move every time? The platform, right? Okay. So I've set up my hotkeys, right? So that only what I have selected here, I hit S and that's what sets a key. We did that on the bouncing ball. I still have it set up. All right, so let me just select this. Which direction is it going to move? If it just moves this way. X, right? Because it's red, right? So those things, eventually we'll get it so it's like, yep, X, got it. Once you're comfortable with that, Maya will screw with you and it won't be X for some reason. It'll be like Z or something. But for now, yeah, it seems to be working. If I move X, it's moving X. Whoops. All right, so I'm going to just do a simple animation. It's going to go to one side, stop, hang out for a second, go to the other side, and stop. Okay, that's as far as I'm taking the lecture. After that, I recommend you do that and then try your own animation that you want. Okay, try something a bit more complex than just one side stop, the other side stop. It's boring, but it still looks cool. All right, so translate X. I'm going to start it right there. How long will it take to get, let's just say, across the screen? What was that? 2 seconds? You said 5 seconds. All right. It doesn't matter, right? At this point, it doesn't matter. All we're looking at is I need a start, I need an end, I need to hit play, and I need to look at it to see, does this look good? If it doesn't look good at 2 seconds, I'll go to 5 seconds or 2 seconds or 1 second or whatever, okay? So I'm going to go up to, I'm at 24 frames per second. I'm going to go up to 2 seconds, scoot that over to the other side, set a key. As we're playing this thing back, we want to make sure that we are playing back at real time. That way we know that when I hit play, it's going to play back at real time. If I have it set to this one, and then I hit play, that's not real time. That's playing back as fast as it can play back. If I set this to this, now we're in real time. Okay? Now, how much movement am I going to get on the legs of this, or the arms of this, at that speed? Not much, right? It's going to be very subtle. The platform is kind of moving really slow. The legs are going to like barely move at all. Okay, so let's crank this up a little bit. We learned before, I can hold shift, I can highlight that keyframe, and then use the double arrows to move that left and right if I need to, okay? This is typically not the preferred method for me to do this. This is where I'm going to jump into the dope sheet, which I do have a thing right there, but I'm just going to go here so you can see it, dope sheet. And this is where I'm going to modify the time. I'm not worried about values, I've already set that. Start here, end there. But now I'm going to be controlling how far apart are these keyframes and how fast is it going to go. So I'm going to grab this keyframe. If you're going to move something, what tool do you need to be in? Move, okay? Everywhere in Maya, you have to be in the move tool to move stuff. So if I'm in the regular selection tool, this one, and I select something and I try to middle drag, I get this. So just make sure you're in the move tool. And then I can just scoot that back. So let's take it to 1 second. Let's just see what 1 second looks like. Okay, so that doesn't look too bad. All right, I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to go to, like, I don't know, whatever this is, 30. And then we'll hit play again. I'm going to set my work area really low, though, because I don't want to keep watching this all the way to 120. There we go. All right, so that looks good. All right, so now if this was After Effects, people in here have had After Effects. We've set some keyframes. What's typically the next step? Graph editor, right? So same thing here. We've set some keyframes. We need to get in the graph editor and start tweaking it. I will click on my No Graph Editor button. And there we go. Okay. So just like the bouncing ball, we have a graph. We need to control where stuff is going to be happening. So what kind of motion do we want for something like this? Whatever we want. Right. So we could have it go like this, like that, and it's going to like fly off, right? Like we saw in the video, something like this might be like a bullet. A bullet launches out of a gun super fast and then gradually slows down, right? And that's going to do the opposite. It's going to have a slower effect, and then it's going to ramp up, right? So we need to consider everything in our animation. So let's put it back to that for a second. Slide this over here. Let's watch our animation. Okay. So what are the legs doing? Right here. Dragging behind. Pretty far, right? It went pretty fast. Those legs are they're flying up there. Now, as this is starting to slow down, what are the legs going to be doing? Coming back, right? So they're going to start to slow down, right? When they get to here, they're pretty much going to just like softly hit down and then do that, right? Because it's kind of like fast at the beginning. Now let's swap that around. Let's go like that. And let's go like that. All right. That's horrible. Hold on. All right. It's better. All right. So now what's this going to do at the start of it? How much of the leg's going to kick up here? A little bit. Barely anything, really, because it for this frame to about 10, it really hasn't moved much at all. Now, when it gets to this side, where are the legs going to be at here? A bit further behind, right? And then what's going to happen when I hit 30? Yep, it's going to flip to the other side, right? So depending on the kind of animation we want, if we're going to do fast at the start, at the end of the animation, the legs are going to move slowly. If we do fast at the end, the legs will really whip around. So if I'm planning an animation, the legs flapping around at the end, like going past it, is much more interesting, much more fun to look at. So I'm going to leave it as this graph so that it starts really slow. And I have to move this up a little bit. Starts really slow and then picks up speed at the end. Okay. Now if I need to, I can do the same stuff we've done before. Weighted tangents, free tangent weight, and then I can attempt to, let me just break the tangent here, there. It's not letting me move it any further. There we go. So I can do something like that if I wanted to and really kick the speed up so it's like basically not moving and then shoots across, right? The more impactful it is, the more we're going to get. Anytime you do an animation, think about being more dramatic than you think you need to be, okay? If we're too subtle, we might miss it. So, that's cool. All right, so we're going to animate just the platform first. That's all we're doing. So, from 1 to 30, the platform slides. Okay, we're going to hang out for about 20 frames. And then it's going to slide back to the other side. So I'm going to go to, this was 30 frames. I'll just do another 30 frames and then slide that over. And then go back to my graph editor. I'm going to break my tangents and do a very similar setup, okay? Now remember, because this one is going from down here to up there, the slow part is here and then the fast is there. This one, it might seem like you want to push this down and mimic that graph, but we don't, because otherwise it'll be fast at the start and slow at the end. I want it slow and then fast. That's what it's going to give me. Like that. Okay, so let's just see what that looks like. And just like the bouncing ball, I'm kind of compartmentalizing all the stuff so that I can focus on just one attribute, one item at a time. Okay, that looks pretty solid. Boom. Okay. Some things to look out for while you're doing this. You guys have seen Spaceballs. What's the first rule of using your Schwartz lightsaber? You don't cross your Schwartz. So you never cross this, okay? We never go past that line, okay? Your keyframes are the extremes. We don't want to go past an extreme and come back to it, okay? Save that for the pros. We want to set it for the main areas. Like it's here, it's there, and I'm going to control everything in between. If I wanted it to do this, I would set a keyframe right here, and that's where I would focus my attention on, this transition to here to there. Now, if I did just what I did there, just went past that extreme, watch what happens. See how it goes back and then flies forward, right? Now, this might be something that we do want to have in here. I may want to, just like we talked about on the bouncing ball, having a little bit more impact, a little bit more anticipation into the movement, I may want to go up a couple frames, scooch that back a little bit, and then set a key. Now that means I have to come in here because my graph is all wonky, and I have to break this tangent because it's not letting me move it anymore. There it goes. And do something like that. Okay? Now that will give me, right, something like that. I need to be a little bit more gentle with it, but that's what it would be. I'm going to undo. I'll let you play with that after you're done. Again, just kind of working with the basics first. All right. So the platform's done. It goes slow, fast, hangs out, goes slow, fast again. So now what should I animate? What's the next thing that's going to move? Which part of it? You said it. The topmost, right? Think of like a transfer of energy. The top platform moves. That's transferring its energy down to the next one, which then transfers its energy down to the next one, which then transfers it and transfers it and transfers it. And because energy can't be destroyed, eventually all the energy from this will be in all of these. So now that we know that, how much is this one going to move compared to that one? Right? So this one should move more than that one. Okay? So this here might move this far back, but this one may only move like that far back. Okay? Because as the energy transfers from here into these things, gradually we're getting less energy moving along that chain. Okay? Now, if I did all these at the same, it would look weird, and you'll see. I'm going to show you what it's going to look like. Okay? Now, for ease of animation, we're going to animate every single one of these the exact same way, and then we'll fix it. Okay? You can do it other ways, but that's the easiest way to do it. All right. So when should this start moving backwards? As soon as it starts moving, right? So let's go here. Now, don't be afraid. If it's not right there, you jump to your, you open the right window first before you open the right window first, there you go. You jump to your dope sheet and you shuffle the keyframes over. So if you're wrong, you move stuff. It's no big deal. All right. So where is the extreme? Where is going to be the highest point of those things being kicked up? Mm-hmm. The fastest point is where it's going to be up the highest. Yep. So if we had this graph up here, where's the fastest point? right there, okay? So let's jump back. I'm going to grab my curves, and I'm going to kick it back. And again, I'm going to exaggerate it, and I will tweak it after. Calm down. Cool. Okay, does that look right? Ignore the second part. So what looks wrong about that? Is rotating way too fast, right? So the speed of these have to match the speed of the rest of it, right? Going from position A to position B of the platform need to match the other one too. So when we come into the graph editor for this, like that, right? So now it's going to go from very little movement and ramp up really quick. So now we shall see. That feels better, right? Except for that part. All right, so what happens after 30? 31. That's right, 31. That's what I was going to ask. So again, we don't know how many frames after this, but yeah, it's going to flip to the other side. So if you don't want to guess, just go every 5 or every 10, okay? I have from 30 to 50 to do whatever I'm going to do here before it takes off again. So I'm going to go to 35, and I'm going to flip it around. Okay, and then I'm going to go to 40, and then what happens at 40? Yep. So should it just go right there? What should it do? A little bit that way. And then go to 45, and go a little bit that way. And then 50, and go back there. Okay. Let's ignore the second part of this for now. We're just going to focus on up to 50. So pretty decent, right? Just setting 5, 5, 5 keyframes, that pretty much works. Cool. But it's still pretty horrible. We'll have to fix it. So we need to obviously adjust stuff. So here's one of those times where I wouldn't necessarily want to tweak one of those things. So in this case, it is going to go past the keyframe. But if I were to try to change that, it wouldn't flow nicely from one position to the next. I want the legs to feel nice and flowy. So anytime I were to take them and do something like, click the right button, there we go, like this, it's going to go like, that's going to look weird. You want to have it nice and flowy, nice rounded curves. I'm not going to destroy any of these. I'm just going to leave them nice and rounded the whole time. All right, let's take a look at this. How far, you guys probably can't read that, but that is how far it's going to be going on turn number 1. That's not what I wanted. Okay, so that's how far up it's rotating. Okay, negative 41 degrees backwards. So what should happen the second time? Right, less. Positive 38, yep. So we're going to go to this one, and you'll see I'm at 34. So magically I was apparently right. And then the next one is less than that, so negative 17. And then the next one is less than that, 7.6. And the next one is less than that, it's like 0 almost, okay? So every time that it swings, it's gradually going to get lower and lower and lower. Depending on the kind of material that we're dealing with, is going to control how many times it swings back and forth. I could have this go, 40 degrees, 38, 36, 34, and back and forth forever, but that would be really boring. This seems to be a good amount. And the speed at it's going actually feels pretty good. Okay. Because what happens here is that this movement happens a lot farther, right? So this is going from negative 40 to positive 38, and it's taking 5 frames. Now it should be slowing down, and it does. It slows down because it's not going as far, but still taking 5 frames. And this one is still taking 5 frames, but it's going less far. and then the same thing there. So we don't need to adjust really the spacing of those keyframes. 5 frames seems to work. If it didn't look good, I would go with 6 frames, 7 frames, 4 frames. You play around with it and see what's going to work. You have to develop an eye for what the motion's doing. As it starts here and it moves and it hits that wall, if something doesn't feel right, you need to just look at it and be able to adjust it. Okay, I'm going to go into the negative frames. There we go. And I'm going to take those, I'm going to take my main curve, and I'm just going to scoosh it back some. Come on. No, click the right button. There we go. So this is negative 24 is where I'm starting this. So I don't know, I went to negative 500. So negative. Okay. Right, so that still kind of works. Right, the animation's still there. It still feels okay. But it doesn't feel as dynamic. It doesn't feel as alive as that first one. We didn't really get into the action as much as the other one. There was a lot of like waiting time between here and about there. Okay, so negative 24 is no bueno. Let's put that back to 1. Okay, now I'm just going to reset this back to 1. That looks good. All right, so now that part's good. I'm going to go up to the next 100 frames, or yeah, next 100 frames. There we go. And grab my platform curves again. There we go. All right, so I have a keyframe set here. So where's the extreme going to be? We already said where it's going to be, right? The extreme. It's going to be rotated back. And then again, I'll go every 5 frames and then just shrink it down. Very subtle. Okay. So that's what my graph looks like. So this thing goes from, these are my arms. So it goes from 0 to kind of winding up, and then does its wiggle, and then it takes off again, and then does its wiggle. Now, this graph here should look very similar to that graph there, okay? If we watch this, we're going to see it doesn't look quite right, and we'll have to fix it. There it goes. Okay, so what happened to the arm on the second one? Yeah, the tail just started moving up way too fast, right? Just like the other one. I can tell that in the graph editor. By the end of the semester, hopefully you can too. I failed, just quit. So I'm going to break my tangents. I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to ease that down. I don't know why I broke that one. I just want to ease that one down. Slide that over screen, rewind it, hit play. There it goes again. Okay, the first one, it feels very flappy. The second one feels a little bit stiffer, right? Because it doesn't rotate up as much. So the amount that you rotate that first time really does dictate the feel that we're giving off for this kind of animation, okay? Now keep in mind, everything is editable. So if I don't like where that is, I go in here, and I just start punching in numbers. So let's put this at 80. It's a huge number, it's going to be crazy. Let's put this at negative 60. Let's go to 40. Let's say 35. I'm pulling these numbers out of the air. Negative 20 or 15. And that. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, obviously much more wiggly. We can go back in the graph editor and tweak things and calm things down a bit. Go back. Now here is another fun little tool inside of the graph editor. This little arrow right here will control how you're able to move points around. So if I click this, with the move tool, I can move this in any direction, okay? Somehow this gets clicked on sometimes, and you get frustrated because you can't move it certain directions. But this is the purpose for it. I only want to be able to move this up and down. That's all I want to do. So I'm going to change this to just the up and down arrow. And now when I marquee it, now I can just drag these up and down without screwing up my timing of that. There we go. Slide that over there. Rewind, hit play. There we go. So that feels, again, pretty good as to how it's animating. Okay. So would we call that done? Just like your parents, when they ask, is your room clean? They already know the answer. Right? And if I'm asking it, it's not done. The room is never clean enough. So remember we talked about how energy is going to flow from the top to the bottom, right? What is it doing right now? How is the energy flowing from the top to the bottom? Simultaneously, all at the same time, and all the same amount, right? So you still need to adjust that. We're first going to adjust their offset, okay? So I'm going to basically offset the animation so that the top curve moves first, then the second curve, then the third, then the fourth, and then the fifth. The trick with this is to make sure you select them in the correct order. It makes your life a lot easier. So it doesn't matter which way I start as long as I remember which is which. So this is number 1, so 1 will go first. 2 will go second, and you get the rest of that, 3 and then 5. Okay. So now when I come into my dope sheet, which is a perfect spot to do this, here is curve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now notice as I click on each name, it's highlighting all the keyframes for it. So if I were to click on, let's say, 2, I'm in the move tool, and I just middle click and drag to the right, I've just offset all those keyframes 1 to the right. I'm going to do the same thing for 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so now what's going to happen is 1 will go first, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. Now, if you still have it locked into your memory about what it looked like before, just picture it so you can see the before and after. Oops, let me zoom out a smidge. All right, it's going to start there, and we're going to end up there. Let's zoom in. All right, that's good. Okay. So without a doubt, that looks a lot better, right? Now, we saw it looked like it was pretty good. There's always something more we can kind of do to it to make it a little bit better, a little bit more noodlier. So is it good now? No. What's one more thing we have to do? It's going to involve this mess. Okay. This is why we offset them first, so we can see. So just like the the number 1 will move first, then number 2, then 3, and so on. The energy for number 1 is going to be the greatest, 2 will be least or less, 3 will be less, 4 will be less, and 5 will be the least. Luckily, we just offset these in the exact order they need to be in. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here first just because visually it feels better, feels more right. This one is going to move the most. Which one's going to move the next most? That one. And then which one's going to move the third most? Yep, and so on, right? So this graph here should look like this. I went too far. That was too aggressive. Hold on. There we go. Right? So the most, the least. Whoops. And then when I come down here, it's always going to be the most and the least. Now notice how I'm not pulling these ones down. I'm moving these ones up. Our 0 point is right here. That's where everything is nice and flat. So that's where I want everything to be stationed at. Now in doing this, I kind of jacked up this curve, so I need to grab all of these handles and just middle drag to smooth that out. There we go. I think that's the only spot I have to do that in, because that'll be the first one. And then you don't have to go like insane on how much, you don't have to whip out a calculator to figure out the exact amount of energy loss. We just need to know that it's going to be less. I don't know how this one got so far off. And then this one is like, it's so close to 0 anyway, No one's going to notice that. Yeah, I don't know how this one got so far off. So same thing, just scoochy, scoochy. And it doesn't matter which order you do these in, as long as you have some kind of like pattern to it. You could even take this one, let's say, and move it up. There's nothing wrong with that either. As long as it goes from biggest to smallest, you'll be good. And then just like the last edit in the dope sheet, this will also be like a kind of more subtle adjustment. I'll probably use back at 0 at the end. Oh, nice and even. Oops, I didn't do this one. There we go. And that one's good. Okay. And then this is where it's kind of coming to rest, so that's not a huge area anyway. I already did that. Okay, so let's just see what this looks like. We rewind, we play. Okay, so there's definitely not spinning up as much because we cut down on all of them. If I rotate one 45 degrees, the next one 45 degrees, the next one 45 degrees, the next one 45 degrees, we basically like looped around to like a 180. Well, now it's less for each one, so we're only going to be going obviously a smaller amount. If I needed to, jump in the graph editor, tweak the curve some more if I want more of an emotion, more of movement in it, but that's pretty good. Now, we're going to pretend that we screwed up. I forgot something. I'm going to go to my, not that, get that icon someday. Someday I'll afford it. Actually, that is what I wanted. So I'm going to go in here. I screwed up, so I'm going to reset. Just move everything back 1. There we go. So now everything's back in alignment, so if I needed to adjust anything, I could. If I want to grab all these and put all these at 20, they all smack back together at 20, okay? So very easily, you should be able to go into the dope sheet, move stuff around, go in the graph editor, move stuff around, and if you need to, adjust, reset, whatever you need to do to get the animation looking good. Mine was perfect, so I'm just going to put it back where it was. Okay? There we go. So start off with this simple animation. Just go from one side to the other, stop it, and then go back to the other side. That way you can get the gist of it. You can get the feel for using the dope sheet, using the graph editor, playing with the curves, playing with the keyframes, the timing. This is only 110 frames at the most, but this is what's going to take us into that next stage of cool animations. Okay. Now, when you do your materials, same process. I'm not going to go over that again. The only difference is here, we select stuff in the outliner. Okay, this is all locked. I can't select it. So I go in the outliner, and I can click on the base or the hinges, and then I can do my assign new material, Arnold, hinge material. And then give this a color, not bubble, carbine. There we go, beautiful. When I do my lighting, when I do my cameras, when I do my scene setup, even when I'm doing my animation, think about the scale, right? So if I were to have this move from this side of the screen all the way to that side of the screen, my camera is going to have to follow it, right? Way back here, you can't see anything, right? Even like here, I see this ugly side there. I wouldn't want to see that. I'd want to position myself so I don't see anything like weird like that. Like that's kind of a cool angle. Maybe I'll go a little closer. Don't want to see that. Don't want to see that. There we go. Don't want to cut stuff off either. That's pretty good. Okay, so something like that I could use. Lighting is going to be the same. Rendering is going to be the same. The only thing you have to watch out for as far as rendering goes is just making sure that your motion blur seems to be working correctly. This is moving obviously a lot faster than our other one was. So I'm going to go to, let's say, about here. I'm going to drop in a sky dome light. I'm going to go to my Arnold renderer. Can't see a thing. Let's just get rid of that background for now. Get rid of that. There we go. Okay, so there's where it is without motion blur. And go to motion blur, enable, turn camera off. Okay, so that's 2 steps or 2 keys. If I do 5, didn't notice a huge difference in that frame. Okay, I don't need deformation on this. That's not going to help at all. And end of frame. There you go. That feels better, right? So stuff we want to pay attention to. I think I don't need 5 in this case. If 2 is good enough. Yeah, that seems good. Okay, especially with the thickness of these things, you don't want to be too far away from it. Okay, if you're too far away, you're not going to be able to see anything. You want to be somewhat close to it. So as you're creating your animation, you're storyboarding it out, think of the space of where it's going to be. Okay, and then that's it. That'll wrap up that assignment. Questions?